Welcome to coffeeis.me podcast, where me means you, or more precisely, us. This is the show where your host, Valerian
and Marcus,
without using any interrogation techniques, convinces coffee professionals to reveal their secrets to teach and inspire you to make better coffee and earn a few bucks on the side, if that's what you fancy. Let the show begin.
Hello coffee lovers, welcome to another episode of Coffee Is Me podcast. I'm your host Valerian Hrala. If you wonder where Marcus is, then you have to know that Marcus will be not with me for the next few episodes for two reasons. One, it's pretty obvious we are living in a pandemic world and we should be separated. And the other reason is that in the next few episodes I want to cozy up with our Coffee Pro members. But I do not blame you if you want to listen to more of Marcus's wisdom, and you can do so at coffeecampus.com. At coffeecampus.com, every week Marcus interviews people through Zoom. So if you're into that kind of thing, go ahead and listen to that. If you want to listen to the previous episodes, just visit coffeecampus.com/blog and you can check them out. In the next few episodes, I'm going to interview some of our Coffee Pro members. Coffee Pro is our flagship online education platform where you can sign up and get over 26 hours of content. There are over 300 videos and over 12 courses which can guide you all the way from seed to the cup, and you learn about roasting, about farming, you will learn everything about blending, espresso, and so much more. One day I was really curious, who are our members? And I checked out their domains. I was super surprised that we have very interesting brands there. And some of them I contacted and asked them if they are willing to share their wisdom. As the first volunteer was Nick Walton from Flag and Wire. Nick's story is amazing. He's a kind of a rebel who was tossed out of his home and he had to sleep in his car. Later he worked in the coffee industry carrying heavy coffee bags. But today, together with his wife, they run the brand called Flag and Wire. We're going to unpack a lot in this episode, but kind of highlights, except, the Nick's fascinating story would be the passion. Like, do you really need passion for coffee when you start your brand? Or what kind of passion do you need? And one of the highlights would be talking about sales channels. I know you guys love this one. Everybody wants to know what are the working and non-working sales channels. And as you will learn from this episode, it's for everybody something else. But, me and Nick will going to discuss our best sales channels. And if you have other opinion, just let us know because, we are learning too. I mean, we hope that you guys get a little bit interactive with us and let us know what works for you and maybe even share your tricks. Well, come on, we are sharing our tricks, so you should share your tricks, right? All right, I hope you will have as much fun with this as I did. So let's listen to the podcast with Nick Walton from Flag and Wire. Hey Nick, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad that you take the opportunity and have time for us to share your wisdom or your experience in the coffee industry. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it, and I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah, it is going to be fun. But before we start, I want to know what's hidden behind the name.
My wife and I are first-generation entrepreneurs. Both of us have awesome parents, but not a one of them is a business person. And so for us, we bought the roasting company back in 2009, and we didn't know what we were doing at all. And so for us, for a long time, it was, kind of 2 steps forward and 1 3/4 back. And we went through a rebranding process in 2015, and we worked with a naming consultant. She was out of Sacramento. It was a really good experience, and she taught us some metrics and some lenses to look through when you're looking at naming something, whether it's naming a human child or naming a business or naming a new product launch or whatever. And so the name itself needed to be, when we were rebranding, it needed to be evocative, it needed to be spellable and pronounceable, and it needed to be procurable, meaning not just, kind of .com stuff, but also patent and trade office. We needed to be able to protect that name. And the name came from a poem that I had memorized when I was a little boy. And anyway, I'll spare you the entire poem, but the poem is about, kind of perseverance and success. And so the last line, it's kind of a horse racing reference, an old horse racing reference. And the last line is the battle is fought in the home stretch and won twixt the flag and the wire. And so it's just sort of the flag was the beginning of the race and the wire was the end of the race. It's where we get, vernacular like, we're down to the wire on this project or it's from that old horse racing. There was the finish line was down on the ground, and then high up above the stands, up above the spectators, there was a wire that the judges were actually looking through little scopes. And so that's, old gray mare by a nose. It's anyway, whatever, too much talking about that. But that's where the name comes from. It comes from a poem and about perseverance and sort of staying the course.
You touched a few things I want to ask about. It's first, I want to know what was the name before.
The name, when we bought the company, the name was Mud River Coffee Roasting. Mm-hmm. And and we bought that company back in 2009. At the time, we were running a coffee shop. We were part owners in a coffee shop called Slow Train. And we didn't choose either of those names. And so when we had an opportunity to open our own shop years later, we chose the name Chrysalis, which is the sort of which is the pupa state of a butterfly, or a moth, and we really liked the imagery of that chrysalis.
That was my question about like how does a name of a company, how is it born? I mean, that's super important. Yeah. Like you also mentioned that you hired a person who helped you to name it.
Yeah.
I always found them kind of like, oh, what a stupid professional. Somebody else told me that they did that same, and I was like, maybe it's not. Maybe it's we need help with that. Because I tell you an example, like I have the company called Unleashed Coffee here in the United States, and when we named it, we did. I mean, first of all, for us it was important that there is a .com domain we can register, and also for us it was important so people can understand it. Like for me, English is my third language. So it was super important that person like me understands what Unleashed means. So, we went through some testing through people, but one thing we never did, we never patented the name. And you mentioned that it should be patentable. And just recently I was uploading some video to YouTube and I seen there's other Unleashed Coffee. So we went right away to trademark it. And we did trademark it because we were the first, which is, so it is, I think this profession is important. If you can afford it, maybe it's something to consider.
Yeah, I think so. You mentioned the naming consultant. We actually learned about her from a customer here in town. We have a customer at our cafe who's a magazine editor. And I was just talking with Emily one day, this friend of ours from town, and saying, yeah, we're trying to rebrand. We're, whatever for these reasons, but, we don't know. And so she put me actually in touch with this consultant out of California there. And that, I understand where you're coming from. It may not be the most important money that anybody could spend, especially if and I know a lot of your questions here are about, kind of startups. It may not be wise money to spend at the beginning, but for us, it was easy. I look back on the money we spent on that project and it was well worth it because, like I said, she taught us a little bit of the psychology. She helped us, or she helped us see some of the psychology like you're talking about of, what is in a name? And like I said, it really needs to be three things. It needs to be evocative, sort of saying something to your guts before you start, before you know what it even is. It should be spellable and pronounceable, which seems obvious when I say that out loud. That seems like, well, duh, that's, of course it should. But you look around at the world, and there's a lot of names that are not spellable and not pronounceable.
Totally right.
Yeah, and then it should be procurable. So for instance, on the procurable side, that's what you're talking about, getting the name trademarked and working with the U.S. Patent and Trade Office. There was at least one other Mud River coffee roasters, and there was Mud River dog products, And then there was lots of names that were probably too similar out there. As we did a patent or a trademark search with the old name, there was lots of names out there that were like Muddy River, Muddy Waters, you know what I'm saying? Lots of different names, lots of different companies that had similar enough names that it was like, if we did get into a trademark battle later on, let's say our companies both grew, it's all sort of fine and good when you're in, you know, London, England, and I'm in McMinnville, Oregon, nobody cares. But it starts making a difference as those companies grow and might bump up against each other. So that was really important to us. And then another one of those sort of lens points was spellable and pronounceable. And like I said, my coffee shop, the first coffee company, the first coffee entity that I actually got to have a hand in naming, you know, that I was involved in naming, was the coffee shop my wife and I built, and that was called, and we called it Chrysalis. And that's a classic example of something that is not spellable and pronounceable.
I was just going to tell you that I'm not going to even try to say that. You know?
Yeah. And so we had, it was Chrysalis. It was called Chrysalis from the time we opened it. We opened it in August of 13, and then we rebranded the entire. So then we were running Mud River Coffee Roasting and Chrysalis Coffee. And then we actually had a third name we were working with too. I'll spare you the details, but essentially we were working with 3 names. We're doing 3 Facebook accounts. We're, you know, marketing in triplicate. It was just getting ridiculous. And so we thought about Chrysalis, but yeah, for those 2 years that the coffee shop was called Chrysalis Cafe or Chrysalis Coffee House, we had people come in all the time and, you know, just misreading the name, and it was Crystal's Cafe or it was Chrysalis or, you know, whatever it was. And that's fine. And you kind of want to, I don't know if this is rude or not, you kind of want to roll your eyes and go like, come on, read the name. This is my business here. But in reality, we're here to serve people. And, you know, people don't feel, this is kind of a big thing for me anyway. People don't feel loved and cared for when they are not sure exactly how to spell the name or say the name. So
yeah, you are right. I mean, I do a lot of like web work and psychology when you design a website. I don't even like to say that design websites because I design businesses. Designing website, everybody can do that nowadays. There are a lot of tools, but designing a business online requires a lot of psychology and thinking how people react, you know, the right wording and many, many other things. And one thing which you mentioned is you're right. It's not about you. It's about them. If you start to do any business, it's about your customers. It's not about you. If you have a lot of ego, do something else, you know, be a CEO or I don't know, be a politician. But if you want to be an entrepreneur, it's super important that it's about them. You always have to talk about them. You always have to think like them. By them, I mean your customers or potential customers.
I think so. Yeah. And that's a hard lesson to learn. And, you know, a lot of us, my wife and I bought the company in 2009, but I've been working, you know, in coffee since my first job. My first job was, you know, I'm kind of a big dude. I'm strong and I can lift a coffee bag. So my first job was schlepping coffee bags at a roasting company up in Portland. And that was in 1998 or so. Mm-hmm. And so I'm definitely in the industry long enough to remember the sort of rude barista, you know, trope. And so for those of us who, especially I think for those of us who have been in the industry for a long time, this sounds crazy, but I know that as a young person, you know, I was 17, I guess, when I started. And I know for me, I was looking for an identity, not only as a coffee professional that early, but also as a person. You know, you're still looking for your identity, your place in the community. And so this sounds crazy, but I've talked with people before, that rude barista trope, that kind of thing is so deeply embedded in me that it's something I have to watch out for all the time. Not that I'm rude to people or that I want to be rude to people or that my first instinct is to be rude to people, but my first instinct sometimes is to just sort of not put people first, to not always put people first. And that's, well, it's bad business, and it's also, you know, not the way to live. So
dude,
something we battle with.
The fact that you are aware of that's super important. I mean, I'm the same. Obviously, like, we like our products. We have a personal investment in them. So we do feel that, a kind of personal attachment to them. But the fact that you're aware of the fact that, let me try to make it about them, that's super important. That's cool, So we are not perfect in any way. All right. Do you remember your first coffee, by the way? Because I like to ask this question because that gives kind of a personality to the people behind the mic.
Yeah, well, I would assume that most people's first cup of coffee is not what they would order today. But my first cup of coffee was a big, I don't know what size it was, but I know it was the biggest size they sold, a big raspberry mocha. From an old school roasting company here in my town here, McMinnville, called Cornerstone Coffee, and they are sadly no longer in business. But they were they opened their doors back in the late '80s, I think, and so that would have been my first. Certainly, that would have been my first espresso beverage. My first cup of coffee. I grew up on a dairy farm, so there was always bad coffee around, and I definitely had a few cups of that growing up, but I was never a coffee drinker until I discovered espresso.
Was that raspberry drink something which kind of motivated you to go into the coffee industry, or it just was something you remember?
No, it was just something I remember, and I remember because I was with some friends who went to coffee shops, who went to this coffee shop pretty often, and I was trying to be cool. I was trying to convince my friends that that this was my daily regular occurrence, and so anyway.
So why did you start to work with coffee?
Okay, so when I was like I said, when I was 17, this is a little bit of a weird story. I don't know if this is weird for a podcast or not, but I was a mouthy kid and I was rude to my parents, and things built up, and it was pretty bad actually. And my dad gave me the boot. Like I said, I grew up on a dairy farm, and my dad finally at some point, ran me off the farm. And without going through my entire life story, I will jump ahead and say that I have an excellent relationship with my parents today. We reconciled well. But at any rate, he kicked me off the farm, and I lived in my car for about a month or so.
Wow.
And then a family took me in, and you wouldn't believe it, but their name is Love. Their name is Love. Corey and Jen Love took me in, and and when I moved in with them and their family, they're kind of those people. They still do it today. We're still good friends today. They this is going to sound really terrible. Maybe this will sound awful, but they just they take in strays. They care for people. I'm counting myself among the strays. They take people in and they care for people, and I really appreciate that. So I moved in with them, and Corey at that time was a hobby roaster. He would roast coffee in an air popcorn popper down on the street, and then rush upstairs to our apartment and throw it on a cookie sheet and throw it into the freezer, and that was our coffee for the house. And so so then while I was living with them, he and his wife started a small coffee roasting company, and that's how I got my start, and that's the job I was alluding to. I could schlep bags and lift stuff and move stuff and shove stuff, so they kept me around, and I worked for them for their operation on and off from about 98 to about 2004. And then in 2004, I was a building contractor. From 04 to 08, I was a building contractor. I laid floors. And then at 2008, the last time we had a gnarly recession, my flooring business kind of fell out from under me, no pun intended. And that's how and then I ended up in coffee again.
Yeah, it's a good pun though.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about what happened, but
No.
I always say that, like, I failed many times or things happened in my life, but if you get a big slap and you just stand up, look around and look for the next opportunity, you might end up in your dream job. That's my theory always,
Yeah, I think that certainly has been the case for us. It's a long-term dream, but it was a shock because, like I said, I was in the coffee industry, 98 to 04, but I didn't consider myself, quote, a coffee professional. I was working in a roastery and I learned to do espresso, and I, worked around, but it was not something that I saw myself doing long term. And then like I said, 2008, just work dried up completely. And what happened was my wife is Canadian. She was born in Winnipeg and then anyway moved to BC when she was a kid. So I got married in 2006. And for those first years before we had kids and whatever else, we would drive up there like monthly. We would drive up to see her folks and her brothers. And so Mother's Day, actually, hey, this is an auspicious time of year because it was Mother's Day and we're recording this the day after Mother's Day.
Right.
It was Mother's Day of 2008 when we went across the border, and back then you couldn't afford the phone charges if you crossed the border. So we would cross the border, and I turned my phone off and threw it in the glove box, and we were there all weekend. And when we crossed the border again, coming back into the United States, I turned my phone on, and Corey Love, this old friend of mine, had sort of hatched a plan for us to buy the roasting company, Mud River Coffee Roasting. And so it all happened really fast. It was just up to me to sort of find a little bit of money, not really very much money. But anyway, I guess what I'm long-windedly trying to say is you're absolutely right. I'm identifying with what you're saying. Sometimes stuff just happens on accident. I definitely feel like, from on both ends, originally when I was, a mouthy teen, I found my way into the coffee industry initially because my dad kicked me off the place. I probably would have been a farmer otherwise, or I don't know what I would have done. And, I just ended up here. And then it was kind of the same thing. My business failed. My flooring business just dried up and I didn't know what to do. And then something accidentally happened. I ended up backing into this industry for a second time. And I'm glad I did.
Awesome. I have a similar story, but I will not bore people with that right now. I'm more curious. It's 2009. I guess you knew how to roast coffee on a popcorn popper, but how did you learn how to roast coffee on a coffee roaster?
Okay. Till very recently, I roasted on the roaster that I bought with the company back in 2009, which was the same roaster that I was working with and starting to learn to roast with back in, the late 90s and early 2000s, mm-hmm. which was a weird cobbled together, I call it the Franken roaster. It's a crazy modified air roaster. So it's somewhat similar to a Civets roaster, mm-hmm. but it's not quite exactly the same. And there's a lot of adjustments that both Corey and I made over the years. So that's what I learned to roast on, and that's what I was roasting on what I started roasting on in 2009 for myself.
What's the capacity, just out of curiosity?
The capacity was about 7.5 kilos. I roasted 16-pound batches. I could roast up to 8. I could roast 18. I could get 18 pounds to turn brown in there, but I couldn't roast it quite the way I wanted to. So
gotcha.
Yeah. I did 16-pound batches, and I did that we built our business. It's the hand that has fed us. I did that for 10 years, more than 10 years. We finally fired up. We now roast on an SF25 on a San Franciscan roaster. And we finally fired it up for the first time in January of 2020. So we're really pretty new to drum roasting.
Congrats.
So
basically, if you moved from a popcorn popper to a kind of like your own Civets or Sono Fresco, whatever I would call that. What did you call it? Frankenstein or what?
Oh, like a Franken roaster. Just
Franken roaster, that's right. Yeah. I like that. Yeah, you should patent that brand, Franken roaster.
The Franken.
Did you learn? Did you use any resources for learning to roast, or you just went what you learned from your step parents? ?
Well, no, I'm pretty self-taught, and actually the way I roast is different even. There's some significant differences between the way I roast and certainly my approach to roasting than even Corey, who taught me to roast on that machine. And in terms of resources, we're living in a golden age. I don't have to tell you this. I mean, frankly, Coffee Pro is a good example, but, we're living in a golden age of resourcing because in 2009 even, but certainly earlier than that, we didn't have the kind. I can remember scouring Coffee Geek for information, and there used to be a little, kind of a message board called Coffeed that.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, you remember Coffee? I remember scouring the resources that did exist, and nobody had even heard of what I was roasting on. And so I'll tell you what, I can't count the number of times that I had some sort of interaction with someone. And the way it would go is we would start, whether it was at, an event or whatever, we would start talking about roasting. We'd kind of, get striking up a conversation, and it was going well. And then they'd say, okay, so what do you roast on? And I would start describing what I'm roasting on. And they would either, one of two things would happen. They would either glaze over, their eyes would glaze over because it was just getting too deep and too weird, roasting stuff that nobody's ever heard of. Or the other option, and this was actually more common, people would hear the word air roaster and immediately just sort of like make a judgment for in terms of what I was able to produce with that air roaster. And they had me typecast at that point because I was roasting with an air roaster. So to be honest with you, like, not only did I not have too much in the way of resources or education for how to produce good coffee on that machine, I didn't even have any like buds. I didn't even have any friends, people who were, kind of in it with me. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
I have to say, I don't like judgy people. I mean, there is I'm a little bit different industry, so I don't offend anyone in the coffee industry. There's a book called Postmodernist Winemaking. It's for winemakers. And, I love different approaches. I love when people think differently. I don't like the same and same. I don't like to line up and it's like, oh, this is the way how we do it. But the guy is so judgy in his book towards anybody else. And I was like, I cannot read this. I cannot read. It's like he has to feed or protect his theory by dissing others. That doesn't work with me. So I'm sorry that you had that experience. I think that, if you do something different than anyone else, that's the most important thing, because there is so many third wave roasters which are the same. There must be somebody who does something different. So, I think the air roaster is a good example of that.
Yeah, for a long time I had roaster shame. I talk about roaster shame because, it doesn't take too many. There were a few times where I would be in a conversation with somebody who I really admired in the industry, maybe at SCA or something like that. I'd find myself in a conversation with somebody I admired, and to be sort of, kind of summarily dismissed out of hand, that only happens to you a few times before you stop talking about it. And you just stop telling people, when people ask what you're roasting on, you find a way to change the subject and not talk about it. And so I definitely have experienced that roaster shame, which feels weird to say now. But there was a point, and it was somewhere around our rebranding, somewhere around 2015, 2016, somewhere, where I kind of blinked and realized, wait a minute, I have a business here. It was probably when we started getting profitable. I have a business. People love my cafe. Wholesale customers love the product that I'm making. Why am I ashamed? Why would I be ashamed? I'm making people happy. I'm adding value to people's lives. And I had this magical epiphany at some point in my business. And it was around then, like I said, 2015, 16, right around then, I had this epiphany where, and this is going to sound obvious to some people. It's going to sound like, whatever. Some people will have started out with this, but it was an epiphany. It was a new thing to me. And it was the idea that, we have the power as entrepreneurs. We have the power through brain waves, through the use of our brains and the use of our muscles. We have the power to generate value where there wasn't any value before. We have the power to generate happiness where there wasn't happiness before, add value to people's lives, add value to people's days. And yes, it's not the same, a really amazing Americano is not the same kind of value as a fully funded Roth IRA. So we got to be realistic about the kind of value we're generating, but it's still a magical thing when I think about it. Hey, we can take nothing and build something. we can take a small amount of money and energy and build a company. And that's what we had done. And we're still not, what we want to be. We're developing and changing all the time. But I think I let go of my roaster shame at some point in there, because it just is like, look at what we've built. Yeah, we don't have the greatest equipment on planet Earth maybe, but I'm really proud of what we were able to build from 2009 to 2019.
Nick, very well put. I think you should own it. I think everybody should own it. It's your business, it's your style, and you have to own it. Like I remember when I had my Slovak company called Green Plantation, and we were very famous that we brought in the light roast into Slovakia, into Central Europe. So we were the black sheep of the coffee industry because everybody is doing espresso in Central Europe. But after a while, we kind of like realized that we basically hit the market. There's no more people, or like there's more, but it's kind of hard to convince them to come to us. So we started to roast dark. Of course, by then, the third wave coffee became super, super popular in Slovakia. So we got like another 20, 30 roasters doing the same what we were doing. All of them went against us so hard that, look, they are betraying us, they're doing darker roast. And I'm not talking about Starbucks. We just went a little bit darker with the profile, And yeah. I was like, I don't care. I see how our customers react to that. They are grateful. Yeah. We're getting great feedback, great reviews. Some people said, look, guys, we want to drink specialty coffee, but we don't have the fancy gear. We have this super automatic little machine at home, and I don't even have time to, play around with it. So we want just a solid, amazing coffee, and we delivered. So we are super happy. And I said to Peter, he's the CEO and roaster in Green Plantation, and he was always like, oh, look, they hate us. Like, own it, dude. Own it. We are making people happy. That's the most important.
Yeah. I think that's so. Yeah. Can I cut in with a short story here?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
On?
No, go for it.
Well, so I one story that I kind of tell, and I actually tell it a lot because it's meaningful to me, is it was in 2014. So it was a year and change after we opened Chrysalis Coffee House, after we opened our cafe. And we'd been doing business for, 4 or 5 years and struggling. And like I said, first generation entrepreneurs, we took a lot of backward steps. So it was 2014. We were living an hour away. We were living an hour away in another town from our coffee shop. So every morning, shop wasn't making very much money. I only had one employee, and I could only work in part-time. And so every morning I would get up, at the crack of dawn, before dawn, obviously, and drive an hour, get ready, drive an hour, get to our coffee shop, run the shop all day long. And I was doing this, 4, 5, 6 days a week for a few years. For a few years I did that. And so one day, and we use Square Register. We've always used Square Register. And we had little babies at the time. That was right when we had little kids. My kids are getting older now, but at that point we had 2 in diapers and 3 little bitty kids. And so my wife and business partner, she felt really stuck at that time in our lives. She's an hour away from the business, an hour away from me and whatever, and we're not making any money. And she's watching the Square Register all day long on her phone. She's opening and refreshing and seeing how much money we're not making. And so one day, it was not uncommon, hopefully she doesn't hate me for saying this, it was not uncommon for me to get home at the end of a long day and find her, kind of crying for the business and for just where we were. And so one day I got home, and it was a particularly bad day in 2014 from a revenue standpoint. Just we hadn't made any money, and we didn't, whatever. And so I drove all the way home. I get home, she's crying. She's sitting on the kitchen floor crying. And I sat down next to her and I started crying too. And we're both just kind of a mess. We're not sure, should we quit? At what point do you throw in the towel? I know most entrepreneurs have that moment where you kind of go, is now the time? Is this when you quit? Is this when you let it go or not or whatever? And so we're sitting there, and she said to me, and this is where it relates back to what you're talking about. She said to me, she goes, are you even passionate about coffee anymore? And that thought sort of descended on me. It took a long time for me to sort of get my head around. And I thought about that for a long time. I don't remember what I said to her in the moment, but I thought about that for, days and weeks afterwards. Obviously for years, I'm still thinking about it. And what I came up with, or where I landed on it was, no, from 1998, Portland, Oregon, rude barista territory onward, I had been taught or it had been communicated to me that coffee was somehow sacred or was somehow holy on some level. And I realized in that moment, or due to that moment, I realized, no, I am not passionate about coffee. Not only am I not passionate about coffee, I'm not going to live my life generating or formulating or pursuing passion for coffee. So from the outside looking in, lots of people would look at me. I'm a licensed Q grader, and so is Kim. So is my wife. We're both. And we do this work. We love this work. We love this industry. We love working with producers. From a lot of people's perspectives, you would see this as passionate. These are passionate coffee people. These people are passionate about coffee. But in reality, it's the subtle difference between realizing coffee is a semi-burnt seed of a tropical plant. You know what I'm saying? Let's be realistic about what we're really wanting to get passionate about. What we're passionate about is people,
right?
And generating value and adding value to people's lives. And yes, we love the opportunity to do that with coffee. And yes, we're going to get nerdy. And yes, we're going to, take a look at these producer partners that we're just starting to be able to have decent relationships with or productive relationships with. And we're going to treat their produce with respect. And we're going to make this thing that we work on, we're going to make it the best that it can possibly be. And so, yes, we're going to kind of look passionate from the outside, but no, I am not passionate about coffee. I'm only passionate about adding value to people's lives. And that's something that you can say, but it takes a long time for me anyway. It took a long time to actually get that instilled, getting that into my brain and into my thinking, like, wait a minute, no, I'm not, I mean, a great example is right now we're doing this via Skype because there's a global pandemic. And, so right now we, along with lots of other companies, we're far from alone in this. We're selling a product format that just 6 months ago would have made me throw up in my mouth a little bit, which is the half-gallon size jug of latte product. And so we roll our eyes when we think of this thing, but the reality is people are at home. People are either off work or out of work. People are homeschooling their kids unexpectedly. Some people are very fearful of the virus. Some people are very fearful of the economy. Everybody's confused about what's happening now and what's going to happen in a month, and everything's changing so fast. Think of all the adjustments and changes we've had to make as a planet over the last 6 to 8 weeks. And so for us right now, the comforting product format that people were looking for, unthinkably, is a half a gallon jug of espresso and milk. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So being able to lean into this thing, into adjustments in the market and adjustments in the community is really important.
Yes, I totally love your approach, and I think that most of the coffee professionals go through that process when first you start as a passionate person, you have a certain kind of way, and this is only my way, and then as your ego kind of subsides, you open your eyes that, wait, I'm here for the customers. And I love the same, by the way. I love when customers are happy. So on my side, the story is that William, my business partner in Unleash Coffee, he's a farmer from Brazil who lives actually in the San Francisco Bay Area, but his family and his parents are in Brazil. He went to visit them in end of February, I think, or maybe end of January. He got stuck there. There. He's still there, and I have to fulfill the orders. And what I do, I have fun with my customers. He used to do it all the time, but I'm like always, when they order green coffee, I pack them like a sample, or when they order roasted coffee, we have these limited editions. I just put there something, and a lot of people come back to me, about, oh, what is this? It's kind of cool. So having this kind of engagement and it's kind of fun for me. I don't know. It's much more fun than just doing coffee. The fact that the customers noticed that they got something extra, and did not expect. So yeah, I think you're right. After a while, it has to be about the customers. Moving on, you are. Yes. I mean, this one is a series I plan to basically interview our Coffee Pro members. and you are a Coffee Pro member. And first of all, I want to know, for my egoistic personal reason, how did you choose and why did you choose Coffee Pro? And second, I want to know, how does it work for you, and how did it change the way you think or make coffee?
Well, this is let's see. You asked how I discovered or how I decided. You guys send emails out, and I try to keep my eye on. We're running a business, and I'm a dad, and I'm doing a million things, but I try to keep my eye on what's happening in the industry and who's doing something different, something new, whatever. And so I was, kind of vaguely aware of the program that you guys had put together down there. And then you sent, I think maybe I chatted with one of you. I'm not sure how I ended up on your email list, but I was on your email list, and I, read about the programs, and I remember thinking this might be something we should, look into, or this might be a cool thing. And then just at one point I think you actually discounted it at one point, and I thought, well, what the heck, let's give it a try. And so we did that. That was last year, sometime back late 2019, I think.
Oh yeah, the big Black Friday deal.
Must have been it. Yeah, Black Friday.
Yeah.
And then to be honest with you, I'm going to be really honest with you. I've taken in the roasting classes, the first and second set of roasting classes. We've had a pretty wild and woolly quarter. We've taken on some new employees, and we've also had a couple of long-term employees move on to new things, new jobs, new opportunities, and we're excited for them. But that caused a lot of just upheaval around here. And then we also, like I said, we've also made some new hires of important folks in new key positions. And then my wife and I, my family and I, on March 1st, we left for Tanzania. And so we were actually in Tanzania for COVID-19 as we started discovering, wait a minute, this is a problem. So to be honest, and then when we got back from Tanzania, it's pretty much been, kind of run in place 90 miles an hour, trying to keep things moving, trying to keep things afloat with drastically reduced revenue streams. So I haven't had, to be honest with you, I feel badly about this, but I haven't had an opportunity to take in all of the classes like I probably would have liked to. But yeah, that's how we discovered it. And it just seemed like you had a couple of courses before I bought it. I do know that before I bought it, you have a couple of courses or a couple of clips that, that are up there for free, kind of samples. And I took in a couple of those. I watched a couple of those, and I just thought, I thought it was a cool format for learning. It's not too, it's not kind of homespun or done in the garage or whatever, but it's also not so heavily polished. You feel like you're kind of in the room a little bit. You feel like you're getting it from the people.
Excellent. Thanks for the feedback. That's awesome. I mean, to make a program like this is very niched. So, it's, you can't really do a super duper big production like you would do, let's say, with a cooking class or something like that.
Sure.
But I think that and of course I'm preaching to my own product, which is not the nicest thing, but we did a solid job with the video quality, and people don't really comment that the videos are bad or anything, so that's a good feedback. Well, I hope you will have time to check it out because you guys pay for it. So use it to the fullest, I think.
Yeah.
I want to give a cherry on the top for our listeners and ask you your secrets, your selling channels, which work, which don't, which you recommend to focus on, maybe on a beginning and kind of venture out later, or how does it work for you?
Yeah. So selling channels are complicated, and we've kind of run the gambit of those. Let's see here. For us, I'll just describe our business. For us, we are primarily wholesale, although that's not true this month. Yeah. Our wholesale business has largely dried up, although it's starting to creep back. And then we have a retail space. I think it's really important when you're choosing a sales channel that, again, and I'm awful about this, I harp on this, I go back and back and back to this. If who you sell to, what you sell and who you sell to has it has hugely to do with your values, your vision, and your mission. So what those values are and what you're trying to accomplish in your community will make a difference. And so there are companies that I know, for instance, I am aware every time I open my books to somebody, if I'm going to get advice from my bookkeeper, from my accountant, from my business mentor, whatever, the answer is always the same. Oh, wholesale. Go sell some more wholesale. Wholesale is where it's at. Because for obvious reasons, we all understand there's so much less labor involved in wholesale, and you got to build that wholesale side. The tricky thing is, I have a great relationship with my closest neighbor, my closest competitor, and it's almost a Jack Sprat situation. They have tried some retail operations over the years, and it's never gone super, super well. But their wholesale game is so strong. Their wholesale business is so strong. And when you get to know, as I have, when you get to know the owner and the kind of key employees at that company, it's easy to see why. They just have a passion for wholesale sales. They have an interest in that customer segment, that group, and they are able to serve those needs really well. And we're kind of the opposite. I mean, not that we can't do wholesale or don't, we sure do. Like I said, most of our business is wholesale, but ultimately I love retail. This is just personal. I love retail. I really enjoy retail. I like having a retail space, and I like the kinds of interactions I get and that my company gets in a retail setting, in a cafe setting. And so for me, if I was going to start over, I don't get to spend as much time in the retail cafe as I used to, or as I would even like to sometimes. But if I was going to start over tomorrow, I would really focus personally, because of what I know about myself, my values, my vision. I would start another retail cafe, and I would be a little bit gentler, pushing for wholesale. But I know that there are other folks I've talked to who, are kind of the opposite, who would and have done the opposite, and it's really wise to do the opposite. So, I mean, I think one thing I would caution startups about is the super easy account. If you can avoid doing business with, not that you shouldn't do business with or can't, or not that it's dumb, but if you can avoid doing business with too many brand new businesses, that would be helpful, because then you're tying yourself to someone else's insecurity or financial insecurity potentially. So that's a little point that's something we did. We, early on in our company, certainly early on in the wholesale side, it was just like we were constantly, we had all of our accounts, or most of our accounts, running up huge bills. And a lot of times they were not very sustainable or substantial businesses themselves. And so we were in a position where we couldn't really afford to, carry tons and tons and tons of receivables. But here we are holding thousands of dollars worth of receivables that we can't, And we actually ended up for a couple of years there, about 2000 and, like I said, 13, 14, 15 there, we spiraled into some credit card debt buying green coffee, because we had to keep on buying green, but our customers who, the average age of their business might be a year old or a year and a half old, they weren't able to pay us. And it's not a matter of, they don't like us and they tried to screw us over. It's not that. None of our customers have ever been that, I don't think. But it's just a matter of, they're brand new, they're financially insecure, they're doing their best, but they couldn't pay the bill. So I would avoid that. And then other easy accounts that you got to avoid, or that I watched out for, the secrets. The CEO or the regional manager, I should say, of this grocery chain had tasted our coffee at one of the wineries that we sell coffee to. And he called us up and he said, "Boy, it was delicious. It was amazing. We'd love to have your coffee in our grocery store on the shelves." And I thought at the time, I'd died and gone to heaven. I thought, oh, this is it. This is my break. This is how we write our success story. And then we were with them. We were stocking coffee in there on the shelves for almost 2 years. And we finally stopped when I had a grocery portfolio of about 20 stores. And this was just a few of them from this one company. But anyway, I would every week go, and I had to pull my coffee off of the shelves every week or every 2 weeks or whatever. I'd have to pull all the coffee off the shelf, buy it back from them, and then put new coffee on the shelves. And I realized at one point, there was one juggernaut coffee roasting company that had beautiful placement right at eye level, and they had a nice wide selection. And I realized grocery chains in particular, they are incentivized to have as many coffees on the shelf as possible. You walk into that aisle and it looks like a cornucopia of coffee roasting companies. There's so many, all this cool coffee from cool, usually smaller indie roasters, and it can be overwhelming. And I realized what was happening was and this is going to sound cruel or rude, and I don't mean for it to, but I realized what was happening was we were essentially eye candy to draw people in. And then most folks ended up selecting, that other major competitor's product in the end. And so we pulled out of grocery. So anyway, the advice is know your values, your vision, your mission, know your key customer, know what you want to sell to them and how, and then focus on that. Don't allow yourself to get spread too thin. We sell to bars and restaurants and cafes and grocery stores and online sales and farmers markets and whatever. If you spread yourself too thin, especially early on, it can be detrimental. Every single area of your business, this is what I've discovered, every area of your business is almost like every sales channel like that is almost like another little tiny business within a business. You've got to have a specific strategy for, it's not great. You want to sell coffee on the internet. Do you want to sell 2 bags a month to your aunt and your cousin who are going to buy from you? Or do you want to actually move a lot of product on the internet to people who, don't have necessarily a personal connection with you? And the strategies you set up for that, don't happen overnight.
Okay. Lot of to unpack. 2 things. One, I'm totally with you on the groceries. Personally, I hate groceries. We had a similar issue with a chain when, we had to actually go through a distributor who takes 20% from your wholesale price. So come on, where we are. So we hardly made any money, because that's what they wanted. And also we thought, they have 16 stores. This would be awesome. We were so excited. And then tons of coffees came back because our guarantee was 3 months. And they just sent it back and said, we didn't sell it. And it was like, okay, so there was no promo, nothing. No, we just didn't sell it. And also going to grocery stores, they always try to kind of do the minimum for you. And, example would be like, I remember we pitched to another chain because William, my business partner, he's a big in grocery stores. He loves grocery stores. I hate them. So we went to pitch them, and they were, they said to us that, our grocery chain is all about helping the local business. We want you to guys succeed. And we were like, okay, I was wrong. Maybe, they really help us. And, after we showed them our pricing, they said, the pricing is great. Your story is amazing. We want you. Do you do free refills? And I was like, what? Free refills? Other brands after, X refills, they do give us a free refill. I was like, well, you guys told us that you want to support us. You guys told us that you want to help us. Giving you free refill doesn't help us, in any way. So I have to say, maybe I'm doing something wrong, because maybe there are some guys who do it much better than I do, but I don't like to deal with grocery stores. There's maybe one grocery store which I like, and I be even shop there, but anything beyond that, I'm like, it's just complicated. Your coffees are on a shelf competing with other coffees. It's like a museum, you might not sell. I don't know. So yeah, I agree with you, but I disagree with you really on the website part. And maybe because I'm a nerd, maybe because I'm an introvert, I think that through social media and through your website, you can do a connection with your customers. And a good example would be Green Plantation, my Slovak business, where the COVID situation, the fact that we are strong on web saved our ass. Like, I'm saying it vulgarly, saved our ass, because we lost all our wholesale customers. We did. It just went away. We have a mortgage, and we had to pay it. But our online sales almost tripled. And, selling for a bag of coffee for, a retail price versus wholesale price, it's a big difference. So we actually, because of this, we do it better for the past 2-3 months than otherwise.
Well, I should clarify. I probably was babbling and I was not being clear. I really do agree with you. I think when I first started our company, when I first bought our company back in 2009, it was time it didn't have a website. There was no website. And so I went to a friend, an acquaintance, and he was just starting out. This is in 2009, so that we didn't have tools like Squarespace and Shopify. They weren't quite as usable or cohesive, or they didn't exist. Anyway, and he sold us a website, and it was a big expense for us early on. I think we paid like $2,500 for this website, and it was really sold to me or pitched to me like, this is it. This is the thing that's gonna, we're gonna build this website, we're gonna set it and forget it, and you're not gonna be able to handle all the orders that come in. And the reality is, it's not. I wasn't meaning that you can't have a meaningful customer interaction. What I was really trying to say was, no matter what you pick, that makes me think of grocery. When we were thinking about ditching grocery and getting out of it. And so I asked one of the grocery buyers, one of the ladies who buys coffee for that grocery chain, said, what do I got to do here? I got to move some product and I'm not moving any. And what do I got to do? And she said to me, 4 hours of demo time, doing the demo thing on the end cap and pouring coffee for people. 4 hours per store per week would not be too much. That's what she told me. And she referenced one of the companies that was on the shelf, and she said, well, these guys here, they're not very big, they're no bigger than we are, but they have, for whatever reason, somehow committed to that 4 hours per store per week, and their sales had gone through the roof. And so I think of that with online too, or cafe, or wholesale. I think of my competitor, like I was saying, who's really on it with wholesale, versus us, that maybe we have a little bit stronger retail game. It really comes down to, I think you're totally right. You can have meaningful, excellent interactions with customers. You can add value to people's lives no matter what segment you choose. You've got to develop a strategy specifically for that, and interacting with that customer in that way. So if it's going to be online sales, that's totally doable. And we're experiencing the same thing you are right now. Like our wholesale business is down 96%. This is April or May 1st numbers. Our wholesale business is down 96%. Our retail business is down 55%. But our online business is up just shy of 400%, 377%.
For me, it's always like, and that's why I started, by the way, build my own websites. It's not because I, wanted to, but because there's a lot of web designers, but there's not enough people who can actually build your business online. And there's a lot of things, and maybe I should do an episode on that, what should a website contain, so you can understand who comes, how to kind of re-engage your customers. But for me, the main benefit of a website is, or a web shop, is that when you sleep, orders are coming in, and it doesn't happen, as you said, that somebody told you that, you just put it up and let it work and forget it. No, it's like, imagine a store and you have your doors locked. I mean, your customers cannot come in. I mean, even if they want to, right? So there's a lot of things. Like it's the same world like a retail store. You have to make sure that the customers are feeling welcome. They feel safe. They feel that product, what it's displayed, that they want. And they also feel, after they purchase something, that they want to come back. It's the same. Yeah. Same. Those are the same rules. So set it, forget it. That's the biggest thing, which is a total mistake and that's why, I always say that don't hire a web designer, hire somebody who knows how to sell online, if that's what you want. And if you want a pretty website, let's say you are a nonprofit, hire a web designer. But for business, for selling, you need somebody who knows how to sell online.
Strategy.
Exactly. Yeah. And you have to be involved. There's no freaking way that you go like, oh, I'm putting my hands away. You don't have to design it. You don't have to be kind of like doing the back end, but you have to have a strategy, as you said.
Absolutely.
All right. My second last question, I would say, is, I like to ask this question because, again, there's a lot of people who are thinking to start a business. And if you would have $10,000 today and you don't have your business right now, you're just starting from scratch, you have $10,000, what kind of coffee business would you start, or what would you do? $10,000
is a complicated amount of money because it's
why
substantial.
I'm asking.
Yeah, you did it on purpose.
I know.
If I had $10,000 to start a business, a coffee business today, I think it would be some sort of support business. With that amount of money, you cut out a lot of. You basically cut out a retail experience. You could do a. I've thought about this. I was thinking about this yesterday evening. You could do a farmer's market business, and I think that there's money there. You could do a farmer's market business that really focused on cold brew, and you could spend a little bit of that money on a really, really tidy dispensing setup. Really don't rather than some janky setup like we have had in the past of tanks and hoses and whatever else that you're trying to set up in garbage cans full of ice and whatever. I think you could spend some of that money on a really tidy dispensing system, and you could have a good business doing farmers markets and potentially events. I know here every geographic area is different, and I think geography and we're in a rural area, so we don't have the same opportunities that somebody in a larger city would have. But what we do have is, for instance, all these wineries around here. So if I had $10,000, I probably would look at setting up some kind of. I probably would look at setting up some kind of dual-purpose farmers market vending, and then also cold brew and maybe slow bar catering. So vending meaning events where I have my own register and am able to take money for individual cups or bags or whatever. And then also catering, meaning, I'm set up so that when these wineries want to do, wine club pickup event in the summertime, or when they want to do a employee appreciation event or something like that, we're ready to pull up with the setup and dispense some delicious coffee for their event. That's probably what I would do with 10 grand.
This is awesome. Usually, I don't know if you listen to previous podcasts when I ask this question, people either tell me it's not possible or they kind of like, I don't know. So this was like a very concrete answer. Thanks, man. This was really good.
I am a believer in proper capitalization. Let me say that. I am a believer in. There was a moment when we opened our coffee shop. We did not borrow enough money to open our coffee shop, and so part of the reason that I had my kitchen floor moment in 2014 was because we had not started with enough money. So I am sympathetic to the idea that $10,000 isn't enough to start a business. On the other hand, I think we underestimate human ingenuity. I think we underestimate humans' abilities to knuckle down and do unthinkably hard work, unpleasant work. We think we will break, but we won't.
I'm asking this question because, if you floating in money, starting business is easy, and you can make mistakes. You still have the funding, and now each other. Yeah. There's so many stories in San Francisco Bay Area like that. They just toss money at you, and then you kind of like have beautiful offices, whatever. But Green Plantation was started with 8,000 euros, which is around $10,000. So, and we are a roasting business. We grew, we have now our own house with a beautiful roastery, beautiful cafe and bakery. We have everything what we wanted, but it's not easy.
That's so cool.
It's not easy, and you have to think in levels of $10,000, not in the levels of $100,000. If you have that, awesome. If you have millions, go for it. By the way, that's my secret dream. I always tell my wife that one day I win the lottery and I just, can spend money without even thinking, whether that makes profit or not. I just kind of like carpet bomb, I would say, whole Slovakia with Green Plantation stuff, and whatever happens. It's silly because business-wise it doesn't really make sense, but, if you win 200 million, who cares, right?
Yeah, that's right. Put it out there.
Right. Nick, I usually have wine on these podcasts. You usually record them with Marcus in the afternoon, so it's always very nice. And I'm sure if we would be in live, we would drink some awesome wines, and we talk about them a little bit. So I was thinking that maybe it's 9 o'clock morning or now 10. It's not a good idea to start drinking. At least my wife wouldn't be happy, although I can drink wine anytime. I was thinking that let's just, pitch what would you drink, and I will tell you what would I drink to kind of help out a little bit, give a little love to some wine producers.
Okay. All right. Well, I am, like I said, I grew up in rural Oregon on a dairy farm, and until I was well into my 20s, my favorite wine was cheap beer from the gas station. So I am very, very, very far from being an expert in this area. However, because we're doing business where we are, I have had the opportunity to connect with a lot of really amazing winemakers, and I think I don't want to list everybody we do business with, but or every wine that I drink, but I really like, I'll list a couple. One, I really like the wines that I get from Irie Vineyards, which is just down the street from us here. They brought in the first, let's see if I can remember this correctly. I believe they grew the first Pinot Gris grapes in the New World, which is kind of a neat little thing, pin for their lapel. So they do really, really good work. We also really like wines from Brooks Wines. We've worked with them for a long time. And to be honest with you, I started drinking wine initially, not because I even necessarily wanted to, but because I had people coming into my roasting room wanting to trade, wine for coffee. And so I feel like I have had an opportunity to drink so much good wine that I don't deserve from a perception standpoint or from an expertise standpoint. It just feels like, oh, somebody who knows what they're talking about should be drinking this wine. I don't know if I should, but anyway, yeah, I drink a lot of wine from Irie and from Brooks both. And then who doesn't love bubbles, especially, I don't know, for some reason when the sun comes out, I want my wine to be bubbly. And so I've had some really delicious bubbly wines from Nasty Woman Wines.
I love the name.
From A to Z Winery, and also from R. Stewart here in McMinnville. So that's what I've been drinking lately.
A to Z, I know. By the way, I love Oregon wines. I'm European, as you can hear from my accent, and my climate where we grow wine in Europe is cold, and Oregon is much closer to that than, let's say, California. And it's interesting because my choice, if I had you here, I would give you Rocinante wines. It's a 2016 Chardonnay, and it's by a winemaker, Miss Rachel Ryan. You can find her on Instagram, and I think I should put all of these winemakers we mentioned in show notes to the podcast. Rachel is awesome. I mean, we made wine in the same facility for a while, and I remember tasting her wine like 2 years ago. By the way, she's an advanced sommelier. She's like a pro. And I tasted her wine, and I was like, this is super weird. This is not going to be a good stuff in my head. Then recently, like just before COVID, we had an event where I met her, and I was like tasting her Chardonnay, and it's amazing. It's so nice. So I fall in love with it. It's still closed, by the way. I'm not opening it until I have a reason to. I mean, if you would come, I would open it because there is a reason to. But it's just interesting. So she's a winemaker, but it was grown in a Sierra foothills. So that's why I'm trying to say that Oregon and Sierra foothills have probably similar climate. They're all both cool climates, and I think Chardonnay is amazing on cool climates. I like them much better on cold than in warm climates, and that's personal. I'm not saying I'm professional. I'm saying what I like, and I think everybody should do that. I mean, I hate when somebody says, "What shall I drink?" You don't tell me what shall I drink. I'll drink what I like.
Yeah, I agree.
Because in wine, people try to kind of like, oh, I don't know if I'm professional. They're so scared. You will not believe how scared people are. Like, do you like it? He says, I do like it. Then drink it. That's the best, right?
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate that. Yeah, I definitely do. I definitely identify with that. I mean, I think that's a great perspective.
I mean, I learned it from coffee. You know, I mean, coffee is so personal. Like I remember when I started the industry, you know, we started that light roast with Green Plantation, and people were like, "I don't like your coffee," and I was like, "Okay," and after a while, I was like, "Well, that person drinks coffee for a long time. I mean, I'm happy to educate them about the coffee up to a certain point, because I don't want to change how we drink coffee. I want to show you a new world. If you are interested in it, you are welcome. If not,
then
that's cool too, And that's
Yeah,
why we started
yeah.
the darker roast, because we wanted kind of like, okay, let's see, maybe you will like this one, and they did. So, it's very, I think that, a lot of things are very personal, wine, coffee, and people just don't want to listen to you that, you have to change, you have to drink this and this. No, they like something, and that's fair.
yes, I totally agree.
Tell us, where can people find you?
Oh, you can find me. You can find our company at Flag and Wire on Instagram or Facebook. Our website is flagandwire.com. And if you want to follow me personally, which isn't very fruitful because I don't post very much, I'm just at Nick Walton, Nick Walton, on Instagram.
I'll put Instagram and website, of course, into the show notes. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. And this was awesome.
No, it was fun. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.